Hello everyone. We have Kush Mwani, rank 11 from VKIS this time. I'm very happy to introduce him because he has been one of the earliest students to join the program, and he has been the most consistent as well. Even though he did not write the initial tests, he made sure that he finished all the tests on time and then made sure he took all the comments. And finally, the result is in front of us is rank 11. So welcome, Kush. People are very eager to hear your experiences and how your entire preparation journey landed up in this place. So please introduce yourself to the crowd and tell us about your journey.
Hi, my name is Kush. So I graduated in 2017 from the Electrical Engineering Department at IIT Bombay with masters. After that, I worked for about 2.5 years, almost 3 years, 2.5 to 3 years, and then I started preparing for the civil service examination. I cleared the examination twice, but both times with not very good marks or with very good rank. And this time, fortunately, it worked out well for me. Things fell into place, and it's yeah. I joined the VK IAS mains program last year, and my motivation for joining the program, my biggest and the earliest motivation for joining the program was that whenever I used to attempt test series, in case of any test series by any other institutes that I've attempted before, I used to write something and the papers used to be corrected. And the correction obviously was almost always very professional. But whenever I had some queries about, why has this been corrected in a certain way, or why has this not been considered while correcting this question, uh, the person with whom I am talking to with respect to getting feedback for my answers is not the same person who has checked the papers. So even if the person who is giving me feedback on my answers is extremely helpful, it's a little loss of translation because there's some time that goes into discussing and into putting across my point of view and into the mentor trying to figure out why this person may have corrected this paper in a certain way and so on. So here when I found out that sir would himself be correcting the papers as well as giving feedback, that was something that I've wanted since quite a bit, and that was my biggest motivation. uh, Apart from that, I'd been obviously how I found out about the program was I'd been using sir's Telegram channel for summary of current affairs since quite a bit, and that was very helpful for me at different points of time. I've always sort of believed that reading through the entire newspaper or trying to make notes of everything in the newspaper yourself is not the best utilization of time for someone who's trying to prepare for the examination, because anyway there's a lot of other things to do. You have to practice for pre, you have to practice for mains, you have to read a bunch of static content and so on. And as analysis by different I remember one um, analysis by Mrinal sir about the number of questions that in pre that were from current affairs immediately 1 year preceding. And I think it was less than 5 questions. In fact, in 1 year, it is, I think, only 2 or 3 questions. So I always believed that it's not useful for me to put in so much time. And that is where Sir's Telegram channel had always sort of been very useful in terms of uh, the fact that it had already chosen which are the most important or most relevant articles to read. And there's a summary of how I can use that content, because at the end of the day, even if going to the entire newspaper myself, what is most important, what should be the most important output for me is to figure out, is for me to know after reading how I'm going to use that content with respect to the examination. Obviously, with respect to general awareness or with respect to getting to know about a certain topic mattered better. That does not matter, and that is not. I don't mean to discourage that, but with respect to examination, what is most important is if you read an article, you should know how you're going to read it, how you're going to use it, right? Especially in mains, because that is where you would mostly be using information from the newspaper. So, and the fact that Sir's summary on his Telegram channel uh, pointed that out. Summary referred to where that content can be used or what topic of the syllabus that is used to, that is related to. And that is extremely helpful in terms of the amount of time that you can save.
So, when you first joined this program, you had a very specific problem paper-wise, and you were stuck at that zone for quite a while, and your optional was also mathematics.
Right.
So, can you just brief us about that journey so that people understand?
Right. So, my to put this in perspective, uh, my total GS score in the attempt that I first cleared the exam, it was around 365. I don't remember the exact numbers. And in the second time, I cleared it, it was somewhere between 400. It was around 400, 402, 403. I again don't remember the exact numbers. That is when I decided to join CERT's program. So the second time I felt that I'd put in quite a bit of effort and I'd done my papers well. I'd put in a lot of points. I'd put in examples in across all the GS topics, including ethics. And ethics personally, I'd put in a lot of effort in not just in my second attempt, also not just in my second attempt in which I cleared, also in the first attempt wherein I cleared the examination. Because I've always seen that confident. I always felt that ethics can be a more predictably scoring paper if you do it well, which is why I put in effort in both of my first attempt where I cleared. But despite that, my scores did not reflect that. In GS also to some extent, but not entirely. So that is where I was specifically. And with respect to maths, my scores were around 259 and 251. This time it was 276. This time there's a little bit of improvement. But in my second attempt, where my score was around 251, I was extremely, again, I was very confident that I'd do well because the second paper I'd done almost entirely completely correctly. I came home, I verified the answers, they were correct. They were what I'd written. I was confident I hadn't missed any steps. So the score was a little bit of surprise. But then that's maths. There's always a little bit of uncertainty, so it cannot yeah, a little bit of uncertainty.
So, when you first joined the program and started giving the tests, initially there were certain content gaps that you were willing to work upon, and then you lashed upon the tests and then finished them like almost like in a marathon. So, what was going on in your mind? What was the realization that you've had just when you began your mains prep this time? What made you focus or divert your focus away from maths on again on GS?
Right. So this time, most of my focus was on GS because last time I felt that I'd given maths a lot of effort. I'd done very well, and still I didn't get a score even remotely close to what I was expecting. So I decided that maybe GS is a better bet, and that is why this time I put in most of my effort in GS. I think that paid off. I put in most of my effort into GS in different ways. Firstly, is with respect to content. I've always been my answers have always been very heavy on content, whether it is And last year they were extremely heavy on content. This time also my answers were uh, quite heavy on content. Where but there were some specific topics where there was a content gap. For example, internal security in GS3. Another example is some specific parts of IR in GS2. So those fringe topics from which there's a lot of questions that are asked, but in terms of volume wise, there's not a lot of content to be covered. That is where my content gaps were. World history also, but world history I didn't end up putting effort into this time either, because I felt that the amount of time I put in with respect to what I'll gain out of it is not a lot. But I did end up putting quite a bit of effort into internal security, IR, where there were gaps. I Society, I had put in a lot of effort before also, but this time I added to that, because again, society is one of those topics where you think that uh, the amount of content that you study that you have to study is very less, but you're asked the there are almost, I think, 50, 60 marks questions from
Those
there.
very
So
much.
proportionally, I think it makes sense to put in more time, more effort. And this is something that I did this time. Um, right. So this is what I did with respect to uh, content. The second is with respect to presentation, right? So like last year, I again with the help of this is something that so for example I during the course of my preparation, Asif sir has gone through a lot of my answers, and he has always pointed this out that uh, my presentation is has always been somewhat lacking, and I agree, like my presentation has not always been the best. This is some the other place where I put in certain amount of effort this time. And for example, in I remember clearly in one of Sir's VK Sir's papers on internal security, um, I put in a lot of effort into trying to present those things better, trying to present that content better, and also trying to figure out trying to present that content better in terms of where I can maybe use some vertical flow charts, where I can maybe use some sort of mini diagrams and so on, because I've never been sort of very diagrams person.
Yeah.
And in internal security, as I mentioned earlier, there were some content gaps. So this time, while doing that, so I remember there was one paper that sir had given, and sir had asked to use the answers to that paper itself as trying to build up your knowledge base about internal security.
Yeah. Because you
Uh,
were running short of time, like it's almost like,
yes.
yeah.
So for these short topics, I think that's a good approach to have. Apart from that, I did end up studying some aspects of internal security from one more set of notes, but both of them together, I think, yeah. So this paper for the answers and the other notes that I studied from together helped me quite a bit. I also prepared some summarized notes based on some of these things, uh, but yes. So that is the other thing that I sort of with respect to GS maybe, uh, yeah, and with respect to ethics, yeah, this with respect to GS. So it is sort of trying to maintain the level of content, make slight improvements in the level of fill in any content gaps that there may have been, make slight improvements into presentation and all. Because uh, if you get good GS scores a particular time, then it's also very important to maintain that level. It's very easy to maybe sort of get, I mean, I've seen people who have prepared with me along the course who have received good marks in a GS in one particular year, and they've gone down.
Yeah.
So, I mean, a little bit of variation obviously possible because of how the papers have been corrected and so on. But broadly, I think it's very important if you get good marks, then uh, trying to keep doing more of the same thing to maintain that, and also make some little additions here and there where you think that there is scope for improvement. So, for example, last year in GS 1 and 2, my marks were good. So, that is broadly uh, the approach that I took. In GS 3 and 4, my marks were not good. In GS3, it was not because of lack of content. In GS3, because I have my most content heavy answers are GS3 answers. So in GS3, I figured that it's probably because of presentation, or it's all because maybe the examiner is not reading what I'm writing, whatever. So that is where in GS3 the effort was, obviously in addition to filling in those gaps like internal security and so on. And then in GS4, it was about trying to understand why a question is being asked, and then putting your answer in such a way that it addresses the core answer, and then wrapping your value addition points around that framework rather than uh, going with the same point example framework that may work very well in GS1 and 2. Ultimately, you have to do that, but putting it in context, I think, is more important in GS4 than it is in others. Not that
Right.
putting things in context is not important in other GS papers. I think for some topics like society, it's very important. But for some other topics, maybe it is not that important, where they're just looking for points. So you can just write points one by one and get away with it.
So when we began this program, like we've noticed that you were having some lacunae in one, society, two, ethics, and like you mentioned, internal security as well as international relations and some aspects of governance. Apart from that, we also had discussions on how in GS3, despite having heavy content, why it is, still a drawback for you that you were not scoring marks. Do you think over emphasizing on content or putting more than required content also worked against you in certain instances, or it's just the presentation?
I don't think so. I mean, my answers have always been heavy on content, and I know that they were heavy on content this year also. In fact, this year they were more so than before because
Exactly.
it is one more year. I had one more year to learn more things. I had one more year to put in those things, extra things. So I don't think that is what worked against me. I think it's probably more to do with presentation, with maybe the value additions that I'm making not being highlighted. Those little things that you may think are not important, but maybe they are. You may want them to like making boxes around some important point that you're making, or underlining uh, certain things, or writing way forward, for example. I always thought that if way forward is not being asked, then why should I write it? I can just write more about the question that. So I've always filled up all pages. So um, I thought that if the question is asking for reasons for something, then I should just write 2 pages of reasons. Why should I write way forward? They are not asking. They are just asking reasons. So I can just write 12 points of reasons and not write any way forward at all. Right? But maybe it doesn't work that way. Maybe they want you to write way forward even if they are not asking.
Right.
I don't know. And that's what other people are doing. So maybe you have to do that too. So I started, instead of writing 10 points, I started writing 7 points and maybe writing 2 points of way forward. And that ultimately helps you save time also. It's a it's a little it's a little I mean, it may seem a little uncomfortable because you're not doing what the question is asking. Question is just asking reasons. That's what I used to think, that, if the question is asking, give reasons for certain problems, give reasons for something like by our urban floods increasing and so on, then just give reasons and move on to the next question. And I used to fill both 2 pages with reasons. But 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 maybe that's not enough. So that's again, I think it's a presentation thing rather than a content thing. So I don't think writing more content works against you. But I think if you're not doing something that other people are doing, uh, like I
The
don't know.
content should serve the purpose ultimately.
Yeah, content should serve the purpose. Yes, that is important.
So how did this change exactly when you were in the program exactly? Like which discussions made you help you understand that this transition could have been, incorporated in your answers?
Right. So I think it was mostly the practice that helped the most with respect to, for example, GS3. And I wrote a lot of test papers this time. I think with we with as a part of your program, I think I probably wrote around 12 to 14 at least. I Yeah, maybe around 11 to 14. And then
You
I
finished almost all the tests.
yeah, I finished. I think I finished all. I think I finished all.
Yeah, you
So
finished
yeah,
all the tests. Yeah.
so probably around, I don't remember the exact number. Apart from that, I also did a couple of other test series. So and I did one extra test series just for ethics, three tests. So I did a lot of practice, so that helped a lot. But particularly with respect to ethics, I think discussions helped a lot. Discussions in terms of, and what particularly helped the most in those discussions was, one, uh, what is the purpose of them asking a particular question, right? And so, for example, concepts which we understand. It's not as if we don't understand, but um,
Contextualizing them.
contextualizing them in terms of why a particular question is being asked, such as concepts like why questions like why are ethics questions there in the first place, and so on. So things like that.
So what was your ethics score previously and this year?
Um, I again don't remember the exact scores. I remember sharing them with you in a message last year. So maybe
Yeah,
to
I've
see the exact
forgotten.
score, I can just refer to that message
Yeah, yeah.
if you give me a minute. This year my score was around 123. Last year it was around 94. I just saw them. 95, 94 and 95. And this year it was around 123. Right. So this year it was 123. So yeah, significant improvement there. And it was around 9. I don't have it. I cannot
That's
verify
fine.
it. But even in my first
Yeah.
attempt, when I cleared, it was around 95.
So
It was
roughly
around
around 30 marks, 20,
yeah,
30 marks.
yeah,
It's a nice
28
improvement.
minutes. Yes.
So overall, answer writing practice should be coupled with a clarity and a sense of purpose on what you're doing, why you're
Right,
doing.
right,
So
right,
that essentially was the difference between your previous attempts and this attempt, to sum it up.
right, right. And here I'd like to point out society also.
Yeah, yeah.
Society was one topic where I felt that knowledge gap or content gap is not there.
Mm.
And it wasn't there. There's no content gap with respect to most of the society topics.
Mm.
But I still felt that putting in that extra effort this year helped in terms of
Contextualizing them
in
again.
terms of contextualizing and in terms of extrapolating the content that you might have to
Yeah.
questions that may be asked in the exam. Because questions that are going to be asked in the exam are not,
Very,
this is something that is useful as a
always
general.
dynamic.
So yeah, questions that are going to be asked in the exam are always dynamic, and you have to reuse the value additions that you have, and that is something that I have always been doing with, say, polity, things like polity, or things like maybe um, GS3 economy, but I'm not doing with respect to society. And considering that in society, the questions that are being asked every year are very different. It's important to do that in society as well.
So that was one of the major emphasis this year. And
Right.
like GS1, a lot of people scored low, but that's not the case with you. Like you've maintained scores from the previous times because you
Right.
were putting in that effort. So
Right.
kudos to you on that.
Right.
And you were always done well in the interview as well.
Right.
Like, do you have anything to share about interview?
One thing I'd
Okay,
like to,
yeah, please go
so
ahead.
this is based on some discussions that I had with some of my friends after the marks were released, like which is in the past 1 week or so. And some of them thought that it is, some of them thought that their marks may have been affected in society questions.
I've been saying the same thing right from day one. Yeah.
Right. And yeah, so considering that my score also has decreased in GS1, but considering that it's decreased only by, I think, 5 or 6, maybe 5 marks, maybe that fall in society did not happen with me. So I'm glad that I put in that extra effort.
Like I was mentioning about your interview, you
Right.
consistently scored well in interviews.
Right.
So do you have anything to say on that? Like to sum it up in a short span of time, what according to his interview test or personality test to you, what one should do to handle it well?
Right. Sorry. I think yeah. So interview, I think I'm fortunate a little bit to have done well across the 3 interviews that I've given. But one thing that I think that has worked for me is there are, I would, couple of things that have always worked for me. One is staying composed, staying confident, staying calm, staying like, I mean, maybe smiling if that's something that works for you and so on. I think that's very important in terms of it being a personality test. The second thing is people say it's not not a test of content. I don't know if I agree with that entirely. But one thing that I think has always worked for me is being able to structure my answers, being able to structure my content in a way that it's simple for the person who's listening to it. And it's something I always tried to do. It's something that I don't know if it works all the time or not. Maybe it does not work all the time because sometimes the questions that may be asked to you require you to think quite a bit. And sometimes you may be asked counter questions which require you to think a little bit more. So maybe there may be 1 or 2 questions where, your answer may seem like over the place. But for topics that you are prepared on, I think it is for topics that we do prepare on, for topics related to, say, things in current affairs, because in interview current affairs also becomes very important. I think it's possible for us to prepare not just the content, but also prepare how we're going to put that content in a way that it will be simple for the person who's listening to make sense of our answer. In like maybe structure it in a certain way or structure it in a different way depending on what the topic is. So and structure it in a way that goes down to the core of what that topic is. So it's very fortunate to get that advice early on, like even in my first attempt. I remember I don't remember who was the person. I don't remember which mock interviews it was.
So Kush, having talked about the interview and everything, like if you have to sum up the suggestion for someone who will be giving the interview next year, what would be the key takeaways for interview?
Right. So I think the first and the most important takeaway is to make sure that your answers are clear, your answers are structured, answers are well organized, and they are going to the exact root of the question that is being asked. And not auxiliary, they're not going to auxiliary points that may be good to have, but they're not like the core points. Obviously, composure is very important, clarity, confidence, and so on. So I think these would be the most important things.
Thank you so much for giving us your time and sharing your experiences with the candidates. And I hope you get the desired cadre and desired location. And I wish you all the best for the future
Thank you.
you'll be leading India into 2047 when India will be entering into that 100th year of independence.
Right.
So congratulations once again and thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.